Hey everyone, it's Adam from the Army Painter, and today I have a very fun tutorial. We're going to be taking a look at the paints found inside the brand new Zombicide 2nd Edition paint set to commemorate the new edition of the game. And I'm going to show you some speed painting tips using only the paints found inside. But we are going to use some of the products from the Army Painter range. We're going to use the color primers. The color primers are a great way to speed up your time because it applies a base coat and a primer coat in one. So before we get started priming our models, let's head outside. Whenever you're using our color primer sprays, we do recommend that you go to a well-ventilated area. And what's a better well-ventilated area than outdoors? Make sure it's a nice day, it's not rainy or too humid, and you should be safe to spray. Now before you get started, make sure you give that can a really good shake. After giving the nozzle a good shake, we'll begin priming. Now because we have many different survivors in the set, we want to vary up the colors, and we're going to be using different color primer sprays to base coat each one of them. I've separated this one into a batch of 3, and we're going to use Desert Yellow. We're just going to begin spraying in a nice, smooth, even base coat. And just like that, your base coat is complete. Now when you're finished spraying, turn the can upside down, activate the trigger, and spray until pigment stops coming out of the nozzle. That's a great way to keep that nozzle clean for future use. As you can see, when we were outside priming these models, we're going to be painting up some survivors today. And with the survivors, because they are the heroes of the game, instead of just using one color like we did with all of the abominations and the zombies, we used necrotic flesh for that tutorial, I like to mix it up a little bit and take a couple batches of the survivors and use a couple different colors from our color primer spray range. So let's get to it now. It's time to start base coating our models. So why don't you grab your favorite brush, some clean water, and your wet palette. I certainly love to use mine, and let's get right to it. So I have my first model here, and I'm going to begin painting in the first base tone, the first base coat. I'm going to be using Wasted Jeans. I just picked a color that I'd like, and I think Wasted Jeans is perfect because I do want to paint some jeans on this model, some denim. So I'm just going to apply a little bit of this to my wet palette, and I love using my wet palette because it helps to preserve those paints and prolong the paints, keeps them nice and workable for long periods of time, which is really important when you are batch painting and speed painting models. So I'm just going to apply a little bit of water from my rinsing jar to the paint just to thin it down a little bit. I'm going to load up the brush, and just very simply, I'm going to begin base coating the Wasted Jeans on the model. Just going to zoom in here, and you can just see I have thinned down these Wasted Jeans, this Wasted Jeans paint, and I'm just applying it in a nice smooth coat. Doing my best not to obscure any detail. I have thinned this down with a bit of water. If I need to apply a second coat, I will, but we're just trying to get nice smooth coverage here. That's key when you are speed painting and batch painting your models. Now moving on to Filthy Suit, and I'm just going to use this to base in the t-shirt that our model is wearing. Very simply, just going to try my best to not get this on the overcoat that she's wearing because I want to leave that in that desert yellow primer color. If we do make a mistake, no problem, just grab your desert yellow war paint from the Army Painter War Paints range and you can clean up any mistakes. Now moving on to some of the other models in this little batch here, and I'm going to paint in the skin tones. I'm going to teach you a cool trick. So very simply, I may paint outside the lines a little bit. That's okay because there's a lot of detail here over top that we're going to need to paint in. So I'm just going to block in the skin tones on this character here very simply. Now I want to add some variation to the model. So I'm taking a bit of some dirt spatter that I have on my palette, which is a nice rich brown, and I'm mixing that with the survivor skin because I'd like to give this model a darker skin tone. So by mixing that, that survivor skin that comes in the set with the dirt spatter gives you a really nice dark skin tone. And when we apply a wash later on, it's going to be very natural looking. Along those same lines, you can mix in a bit of white to get a lighter skin tone. This is just a nice, simple, and quick way, especially when you're working with your wet palette, to get a nice variation of skin tones across your models. That way they're not all uniform, just like you would imagine a group of survivors to be. Now, here's a tip for when you are batch painting or speed painting models. Try to work with a limited palette. Pick a few colors that you can use across the models that you're painting. For instance, you grab a blue or even a brown. These are great colors, somewhat neutral colors that you can use to paint in pouches or belt straps or even trousers, shoes, what have you. And that way you're just using that one color and painting it across different models as you're trying to batch paint and speed paint these models. Let me show you right here. I'm going to show you what I was referring to regarding just using a limited color palette and making the best use of the paints that you have. So I'm using Rotten Skin here, and this is almost like a light camo drab color. And I'm just going to use this to paint in the barrette on this model very simply. But then I'll use the same color. I'll move on to a different model, and I will use the same color to maybe paint in the pants on this model, like so. That way you're keeping some continuity between the batches that you're painting without making them look like they're wearing a uniform, if that makes sense. Now, if I were to paint his hat the same color, then obviously that would be one way to really make them look like they were on the same team if they were, in uniform, but they're not in uniform. We want to give them some individuality. And this is one way to do that and also save a bunch of time when you're painting. Another nice trick is when you are painting a batch like this one of 3 models, 5 models, 8 models, try and give each model one unique color just to help them stand out a little bit. Now, it's important to note that we are speed painting here. We're not worried about all of the fine details. We just want to have a very nice and presentable model for the next time you have your friends over to play Zombicide. So you want to block in some colors, you want to paint within the lines, but you don't want to get too caught up in the details. You'll notice that I'm not painting in any of the eyes, I'm not painting any insignias on these models. I'm just applying some nice smooth base coats, get some really strong coloration so that when you're standing at the tabletop, it adds a little bit of excitement. It helps you immerse yourselves into the game a little bit more. Now, this wouldn't be a speed painting tutorial if we didn't have some fast forward footage, some time-lapse footage. So I'm just going to dig right in. I'm going to start painting these models. Tune in. I'm going to play some music for you in the background and enjoy. While this is a speed painting tutorial and we're trying to get very efficient and effective results very fast, we're not going to go ahead and apply highlights in later stages. What we are going to do is we're going to apply a wash. Now, picking the right wash for the models is really important for the models that you're painting. Now, for instance, when we're painting these survivors, I think strong tone is a good neutral wash. So we're going to use a little bit of this quick shade strong tone. We're going to apply it all over the models, and this is going to work its way into the recesses and into the details to add some realistic depth and shading. Hopefully you already have the Zombicide 2nd Edition paint set, but if you don't, when you do get it, it comes with 3 of our quick shade washes: Flesh Wash, Dark Tone, and Strong Tone, which we're going to be using today. I've gone ahead and applied some of this to my palette. I'm going to take a little bit of clean water from my rinsing cup. I like to use clean water at this stage. And what you're going to do, and this is a great model for this because there's so many details on here, just going to apply this at the top of the model first, and you can see how gravity already wants to work its way down the model. That's why we start from the top. Now, quick shade wash and acrylic washes are designed to run over the extreme details of the model and into the deepest recesses to really pronounce the detail on the model. It adds realistic depth and shading to your model, and as you can see, very, very simply, this will dry matte. It won't be shiny. But I do recommend going ahead and applying a matte or satin varnish. You can use either our anti-shine matte varnish or Aegis Suit satin varnish just to seal in and protect your models so that the paint doesn't chip away over extended periods of use, especially for you hardcore gamers out there. So you're just going to work this across the model. I like to use a larger brush. I'm using a monster brush from the Army Painter Wargamer range because it holds a bit more of the wash, and it allows me to really manipulate the wash around the model and work its way into the details and recesses that I want. Okay, and now we're just going to allow this quick shade wash to dry across the models. It should take about 25 to 35 minutes, and depending on how many models you're painting at once, the first model might be dry by the time you're finished. Now, this would be a great time if you did want to apply some highlights. You could go back and reinvigorate some of those base tones with the same color and then apply some more highlights afterwards. But this is not a highlighting tutorial. This is a speed painting tutorial. So for the better part of what we're trying to do, we're done. Now, I would highly recommend applying a coat of our anti-shine matte varnish or Aegis Suit satin varnish over top. Now, what that's going to do, it's a clear varnish. It's going to seal in all of the hard work that you've done and protect those models and protect that paint job, which is great because Zombicide's a game where you're constantly handling the models. You don't want that paint to chip and wear off. So highly recommended that you don't forget that step. All that's left is to base your models. And with board games, it's not traditional that you base and you add any basing materials. You absolutely can. But for these, I'm just going to go ahead and very simply paint them in with some black paint and call it a day. Let's take a look at the final results. I'm really enjoying painting up these survivors. This is the last batch in this 4-piece tutorial series of Zombicide 2nd Edition, speed painting Zombicide 2nd Edition. I hope that you enjoyed this video and the little tips and tricks along the way. I hope that they will help you in your next speed painting endeavor. Now, this box set is available for pre-order today, but by the time you're seeing this, it might be available in stores already. So hurry out and get one for yourself. Get those Zombicide minis painted up and ready for your next tabletop game. Remember that the magic in miniature painting is that it can be as simple or as challenging as you'd like it to be, but with the right techniques, you're sure to achieve some great results. Thank you for tuning in. We'll see you next time.